Hello, this week we're talking parental anxieties. I'm Aaron Covington,
And I'm Tony Ragg,
and we are
40 Black and Dad.
anxiety of being a parent,
Yeah.
parental anxieties. What does it mean? How do you deal with it? Um, what are the things that make us the most anxious as a parent? And also, I think dealing with spousal anxieties, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of different factors that go into anxiety. You can have anxiety from many different places, and we'll definitely dig deep into what that means and how to overcome that and also how to get help with that. So, be a fun topic.
So yeah, you were sending me some good articles here, pulling them back up specifically about this topic.
Mhm.
And maybe that's a good starting place for us to get right into it and kind of share some of our insights and experiences with it, or even the things that really like got you excited about this topic.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, the few articles I sent you, I tried to be as relevant and up to date as possible. So both those were probably from the last few months or so. But I think the biggest thing about parental anxiety is like everybody goes through it. And as I was doing my research and doing, kind of some readings on what parental anxiety is, how to overcome it, where it stems from, like how to normalize it, like there was a lot of things I read and a lot of different stages of it kind of from what I have seen. Like, you have your newborn anxieties, you have your infant anxieties, you have your toddler anxieties, and
Sure.
how those play into, and then like you said, you also have spousal anxieties, like, you know, are you being a good spouse? Is your spouse, in a good spot? Like there's so many different things that you have to kind of account for, especially on your first kid. We talk a lot about these topics, and we're talking about them from the angle of your first child. We don't have more than one kid, so we can't talk to the experience of that. But first time parents, especially now, are starting to see a lot of anxieties that you might not have, that other parents might not have seen in the past. And we'll kind of go into what some of
Oh
those
yeah,
are.
let's get right into those because
Yeah.
well, kind of an anecdote. I was having lunch with a friend, and the first thing he said was, "So are you thinking about death a lot more now?"
Oh no.
Because that's just what I think that's the first maybe anxiety, right? Is
Mhm.
like you want your kid to stay alive.
Yeah.
And from the sense of like they're so new and fragile and there's so many fears right when they're brand new, from like sudden infant death syndrome, SIDS. That's the thing you hear a lot about.
Yes.
And like and how they have to sleep. That they
Yeah.
sleep, they sleep on their back because otherwise this or that. And then just having them in your hands and you're like, oh my goodness, they're easy to hold, but they're also, you can feel like the frailness,
Hmm.
and how little they can control their own bodies.
Yeah, and that's like the first thing I talk about newborn. So, sleeping, eating enough, and SIDS. Like SIDS, I think kept me and my wife up literally, I mean, literally every night for the first 3 months. Like, and even longer than that, but those first few months, every day, like, and that's why I think a lot of that lack of sleep comes in is from that anxiety of, are they doing okay? Are they breathing? Like you're looking over every, 10 minutes, it feels like, to make sure that they're in the right position, they're swaddled properly, they're not
Right.
against the, anything like that. So yeah, that's
So
a
like at
huge
night,
thing.
you're
Yep.
like getting up and checking the crib like repeatedly.
Yeah. And we had the crib like right next to our bed. So we had the snoo right next to our
Uh-huh.
wife's side of the bed. So she'd literally just like sleep, like overhanging her head, overhanging the bed. So she's opened her eyes to make sure. And that was a lot of anxiety because
Oh, wait, wait,
again,
wait. So like a version of like sleeping when, for black women, they get their hair done and they have to
yeah,
sleep with their hand on the chin. It was like a version of that
yes,
with
like
her head like
we,
on the edge of the bassinet,
yes,
so she could just
100%.
open her eyes and look. Yeah,
Yep.
I think every parent had a version of that. We were
Yeah.
definitely checking a lot, and we didn't have a camera at first. So, like you said, you just manual check every
Mhm.
sound, and babies are loud sleepers, which is also like misleading.
Yeah.
because every sound you're like, is that a what's that sound? What is that sound? And you have to go and see. And they're also heavy breathers at time, and they're snorting, and you're like, they can't, she can't breathe. She can't breathe. And it's like, you try to read about it to calm the fears.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, baby's just like their sinus system isn't developed, and there's a lot of new things coming in, and they're just snorting and sounding like little pugs. That's just part of the process. It takes a couple
Yeah.
nights to get used to any of it.
It does, and it's very nerve-wracking, especially if you don't know what to look for or what certain movements or sounds mean. And I guess we're blessed to be in an age where we have a lot of information at our fingertips that previous generations didn't. But we're also in an era where we have more things to think about that potentially other, generations didn't think about, like having your phone or a wireless router too close to your baby, with the airwaves, or,
Right.
there's harm out there where people are trying to snatch babies. And I mean, and then the type of food we feed them, there's different antibiotics. And so there's a lot of things that go into that anxiety right now too, on top of all the other things like SIDS and sleeping well and eating right. And I've told the story before, like for the first, I think, half a day or 24, 24 to 36 hours, my son wasn't breastfeeding and he wasn't getting food from the breastfeeding. And we didn't realize that until we went to his first pediatric appointment, and like,
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah, he didn't gain any weight. We need to every hour for the next 24 hours feed him. And that's
Yeah.
what we had to do. And that just caused extra anxiety. Like, oh, he's not eating. Like, of course he's gonna die. Like, you always think of the worst possible thing when that's when you're confronted with any issue. And it's just kind of one of those things that you have to, like, okay, let's just get him, give him a couple bottle feedings on top of the breastfeedings just to kind of supplement that. And again, you're just going through different anxiety after
Yeah.
anxiety, so it's
Food
tough.
is food is such a big one,
Yeah,
and
especially breastfeeding.
they really make that clear to you in the hospital
Hmm.
about the baby losing weight and things. And breastfeeding, maybe we'll do a pod specifically on that as much as we can talk about it, but it's its own journey for everybody,
Hmm.
and babies don't always latch right away, and they can struggle. And then you're feeding a baby. Once you get into a routine and you're feeding the baby, whichever way you are, they start spitting up, and
Yeah.
they're spitting up so much, and it's like there's no way this baby is getting any nutrients from this food, because she's
Hmm.
spitting up every, like right when you get done with the feeding, it's like, whoop,
Yeah.
and then it's like 10 minutes later, it's the chunky,
Yeah.
the milk solids. And you're like, okay, so now you're spitting up old food. Are you getting any food? Or do you like to eat at all? You know,
Yeah.
that's why, in terms of dealing with anxiety, we talked about it on an early pod, but mention it again. I think we both had a bath that also has a scale.
Yep.
And to be able to see that they're gaining weight is a huge, like, it's a huge relief in the first, I would say, two months.
Hmm. And like we had talked about before, it's not necessarily the incremental gains, it's the percentile gains. Anybody who has a kid, especially a young kid, and they know about all percentages, like they're in the 98th percentile, they're in the 50th
Mm.
percentile. Those are the things that you want to keep track of versus they gained 1 pound or they lost 1 pound. Like those, and that's how I think
Well,
us we kind of,
we didn't really follow the percentiles. I wasn't really.
our doctor was all about the percentiles. Oh my goodness, like super percentile. And I guess
Mm,
that goes to the pediatrician as well. Like, but also for us, because again, we had a lot of anxiety for the probably first 2 months or so, just because of the how it started off. So I think that was probably their way of calming us down.
hmm.
And that's one other thing we'll talk about later on, is just, how do you get that help and support from your pediatricians, things like that. But yeah, he first, we switched doctors later on, but he talked a lot about percentiles and making sure that it's, within this range. Like, you're not going to see anything perfect. It's just, as long as we're
Yeah,
in this range on this line, we're good. And we want to see growth and, progress. And those are the things that they always said. And that helped us a lot with our anxiety for sure, especially in those first two or
right.
3 months.
For us, we didn't see the doctor that much early on once we got home. I think we had one the next week,
Hmm.
but they had told us about a weight and like if they lose 10% of the body weight after being born, and then it was just like ounces, we were like, oh, okay, she gained an ounce, she gained 2 ounces, okay, she's back up around over 6. She's close to her birth weight now.
Hmm.
About, she was a smaller baby, so when she got back to her birth weight, that was a big thing.
Yeah.
I think by the time we went back to the doctor, she was pretty close to that. So the doctor didn't was like, okay, so she's eating, and we can see that. And her percentages on things are low because she was a smaller baby. So I think that also affected how it was being looked at. They
Hmm.
were like, well, she is healthy and these things are healthy. She just is small, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
What
Yeah.
are other ways of like dealing with the anxieties? Because I think some of it is a lot of parenting is its own rite of passage.
Hmm.
You're going to check the crib obsessively the first 3 months. You're
Yeah.
going to. And when you get that camera, you're going to, if it's connected to your phones, for example, you're going to check that app.
Yeah. All the time.
And you're always going to be concerned about the spitting up, which is constant and common and something kids just do. No
Hmm.
matter how many times somebody tells you that, you're going to be concerned about that. So, what are some strategies of dealing with that anxiety or kind of continuing to move forward in light of it?
Yeah. So there was four that I had kind of just from my readings and from my research that I thought were the most helpful for me that me and my wife did. So the first one is talking to your partner. Like I think that's a big one because they say anxiety is transferable. Like if
Mm-hmm.
you're freaking out and your partner's freaking out, then that's gonna like the baby is in an environment of stress and anxiety, and that could transfer to the baby later on. So just being there with your partner, being reassuring, just like talking through different things because if you're thinking something, he or she might be thinking something as well. So just kind of talking through that and kind of talking each other off the cliff. That was one. Also, social support. And this is a big one for dads. Like dads, we don't talk about baby and parenting and child rearing and all that kind of stuff. Some things that make us nervous. So I think now with social media and Facebook groups and podcasts like this, I think it just helps you realize you're not alone and it can take some of the anxiety off. And another big thing before I get to our last one is you're talking to your pediatrician. Like our pediatrician, I'm gonna say him by name. Hopefully, I'll get Dr. Jolly. We were extraordinarily blessed to have a black male pediatrician. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's like he's a unicorn, like one of one, and he is. And I live in San Diego, and he's like one of the most highly rated pediatricians in San Diego. Like every person we talked to, and we mentioned his name, loved this guy. But he was just so real and comforting, and especially from a male perspective, because he understood what I was going through and could help me through it. It's kind of preemptively. Like for instance, I told the story about have never holding a baby before in my life, and he walked in, day two, we're still in the hospital. I'm still afraid to hold my son. He picks him up like a football, puts him in my hand. I'm like, oh, I understand football, Carrie. Like, and then from there, like that just kind of eased a lot of my anxiety of, okay, am I going to hold him the right way? Am I going to do this? Am I going to do that? So our pediatrician, like I said, we were absolutely blessed. Um, he had the things that he always would always say, let me worry about these things and I'll tell you when it becomes worrisome. Like, and that
Right.
was a big
Sure.
thing for us. It's like, okay, he's worrying about the things that we are worrying about. We're kind of giving him those things to worry about while we're taking care of the eating, sleeping, and the normal day to day things. And if something that he saw was out of range, out of percentile, he'll let us know, and then we can do that. There was like a little head shape thing, which you'll get into, where you have to make sure the baby's turning. Legend had a little bit of a odd shaped head at first. He's like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
normal. I'll worry about that. If it becomes an issue, I'll let you know. He had a heart murmur for like a day, and he's like, you know what? It doesn't seem like it's anything, but let's go have him do a cardiac ultrasound or whatever, and we'll take care of it. I'll look at it, and if it's something to worry about, I'll let you know. There are all these little random little stories that he helped kind of preempt some of our anxiety or just kind of offset it, and we just kind of put the worry on him while we
Yeah.
took care of the day to day, and that was super important. And the last one was just like, taking care of yourself. Like We talked about self-care, mentally, physically, eating well, resting. Those are actually always just to relieve anxiety just in general. And it's super important to do those things, obviously, when dealing with the baby, if you have anxiety, because again, anxiety can definitely um, translate or be transition to the kid as they get older. So those are a couple ways that I had kind of read and felt and have used to get past some of the anxiety for myself and my spouse.
Doctors are definitely a big help. Um, we've seen two doctors because one was out of town when we first had our first appointments.
That happened to us too. That's literally that same thing happened to us
Yeah,
too.
and she was great. She was so great. We were almost like maybe we'll just stick with her.
Yeah.
But then our doctor came back in town and she was great also. So um, and we had our baby had a hernia, right? I think it's
Oh.
a hernia and a granuloma. So when she was born, the delivery nurse was like, "Oh, she's has an any belly button,"
Mm-hmm.
but over time it was still poking out, and then there was like a discharge coming from it,
Oh
like
wow.
that you could kind of barely see, but some days it would be a little messier,
Mm-hmm.
and we were like, "Okay, what is this?"
Yeah.
And we
Yeah,
went
that'd be
in, and
concerning. Yeah.
the doctor was like, "Oh, that's actually no big deal. It's granuloma. It happens. Um, we're gonna send the picture of it to the surgical team and see if or we can decide if you want to get rid of it. It probably would go away
Mm-hmm.
over time, and the hernia will go away over a year or two." We ended up going to see the surgical consult, and he was like, "You just snip it right off. It's no big deal." He was a real funny guy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and my wife was like, "Are you serious?" And I was like, "Well, the doctor said it was like a real quick procedure, so." And the surgery doctor was not even concerned about it. He was like, "Oh yeah," he barely even like. I was like, "If this is their attitude to it, then you
Yeah.
do it." Sure enough, they did a little prep to numb the area. He cut it. She barely cried, and then they put the liquid nitrate on it or whatever, silver
Mm-hmm.
nitrate, to like cauterize it, so
Yeah.
to speak. And then, yeah, it hasn't been. We barely even thought about it. Even after the next day, we were just like, "Oh, we got to check it," and then
Mhm.
it's been totally fine. So that was just an example of working with doctors and them presenting information because they deal with a lot of parents,
Yeah,
so they
exactly.
know how to present the information to you so that if you can listen to them, it can keep you from spiraling.
That's a big one. You say if you listen to them, because like I said, they're trained in all this, and if they normalize it and they are, I guess, nonchalant for lack of a better term, like, oh yeah, that's fine. Like we'll see, and because it's
or
funny, I
or
forgot about
routine,
that.
right?
The routine, exactly. Because I forgot
Like
about that. Something
routine
like that
about it.
happened with Legend too. Like he had the innie, and like, oh yeah, it's just a hernia. It'll figure itself out. Like, oh, are you sure? And it did. It ended up working out itself out. But I actually forgot about that as well. Yeah. So yeah, you want to definitely listen to your pediatrician and don't try to second guess them right away. Like give them a
Yeah,
chance to do their job because they do this
yeah,
every day, all day. You see one kid, they see hundreds of kids.
yeah.
So that's a good point.
And I mean, it does help to, of course, do your research and be prepared. And things we saw online, nothing was contradicting what the doctors were telling us too. So that helped from real sources like the Cleveland Clinic or you
Hmm.
know from like
Mayo Clinic, yeah.
Mayo Clinic, things like that. Not just
Wikipedia,
message boards.
yeah.
But even on message boards, if you have good reading comprehension skills, you can see who's like a real person and who's like telling you their real experience, and you can
Hmm.
start to see where you can. I wouldn't say completely trust people, but understand where they're coming from and what they're saying and how it relates to you. So there's a lot of things like that.
Yeah.
I would also say one thing that can help is also just looking at the baby.
Yeah.
You know, they start making facial gestures pretty early on. So if they're like smiling and cooing and acting pretty much the same, then you know let their ease be your ease.
Hmm.
Also find like on a very practical level, when you can bring the baby face up to your face
Hmm.
in any way, there's that it's like can be really soothing. So like maybe not when they're screaming their head off, but if they're just in a regular mode and you're just like kind of stressed, just nuzzle with the baby, cheek to cheek, and just take a deep breath and be like, okay, this is okay. Cheek to cheek, the baby, nuzzle, head to head. Just bring their head to your head. It's like a psychological thing to calm yourself.
Yeah, do that nuzzle thing again. That was really cute.
I don't know how did I do it. Like you
That's
got to bring it up
that's
there,
very dad
you
cute.
know.
That's funny, but no, that's true. And just to kind of piggyback one more thing, like when you do your research, one place you probably want to avoid at the beginning is WebMD. I swear, and
WebMD is tough.
WebMD is so tough. And like I said, when we had the issue with so we had some blood work issue for my son, and then we had issue what issue quote unquote, and then a heart issue. And we went to do the test, and then they gave us the raw test results back, and then we had a day before we could see the doctor, and they responded to what the results meant. In that day, I kid you not, and me and my wife were both very even keel, like very studious, like, okay, we're gonna dig into these numbers. We thought it was anything from immediate cancer death, like within the next 3 months,
Ugh.
to, like, I mean, to like, I mean, his blood's gonna boil. Like, I mean, WebMD like is not meant for people
No,
who
once you
don't
start putting in
understand.
symptoms, it just
Yeah, it goes.
escalates.
It's the like literally cancer. WebMD must work with some kind of cancer association because every symptom you put into WebMD it leads to cancer at the end.
It
Like
leads
it's
to
going,
cancer.
yeah. So I always caution people that when you do your own research, you should, but don't just start plugging in raw data into WebMD because again, it's percentiles, it's what's normal for your child might not be exactly what everybody else thinks quote unquote is normal. So that's one caution about like where you want to
Yeah.
get your help from and where you don't want to necessarily just go to right away.
Last thing about like parental anxieties and partner anxieties is dads create a lot of anxiety for moms
Yes.
because you're just one, you're a little stronger in in a lot of cases, so you can handle the baby differently, and
Yeah.
that makes moms nervous.
Holding with
And
one hand.
yeah, so there has to kind of be some kind of understanding, and you have to build that trust basically by not dropping or banging the baby's head. You do
No,
have
the
to be
normal
careful,
things.
but as a dad, you're gonna want to like make your baby like fly in the air,
Hmm.
or like just hold her up high, or
Yeah,
you know. Also, I think dads also have a thing that's like, oh, if they're doing something, I'm gonna let them do it.
exactly.
Where
100%.
moms are like, if they're doing something, I don't. If it doesn't look safe, I'm gonna stop them from doing it. So that's a very delicate balance to be like, oh, she's kicking her legs in a way. I think this is good for her. And there's a couple things where we went to the doctor, like she was standing a lot. Like you hold
Hmm.
her and she tries to stand. Now she can't stand by herself, of course. We're holding her up. And it was like, is that okay for her legs? And then the doctor was like, actually, that's good. It's strengthening her legs. It's not going to make
Hmm.
her like walk weird or anything later. So that's totally fine. But it was definitely a thing where it was like, I was letting her do it. And it was like, is that okay and safe? You
Hmm.
know, we need a little confirmation. But building that trust in the partnership is another part of the journey.
That's so true. And there's a thing that I say to my wife all the time. We've kind of agreed on this now. And I've never said it on previous podcasts, was like a lot of times mom's role is to protect the baby from the world, and
Yeah.
dad's role is to prepare the baby for the world. And actually, I have a
Mm,
son, you have a daughter, so I don't know the exact kind of path of it, but for my son specifically, like I let him do things like jump off the couch. Like, well, it's probably gonna hurt one time. You might hurt yourself, but learn how to land. Or he's
yeah.
trying to crawl and grab things, and like I give him a lot of leash to see what he's gonna do with it. And again, hopefully I'm right. I don't know. We'll see in a few years if that's right. He hasn't broken any bones, and he seems to be understanding the world pretty well. But yeah, I think fathers naturally just give that leash to try to prepare you for what's coming, because you can only protect the kids so much. And that's also another thing with the anxiety is like when you try to overprotect them from the world, you create so much more anxiety, like, oh, I
It'll
can't
create
let them
more
do this,
anxiety.
this, and
Yeah.
this, because it's more anxiety. Like but you have to prepare them for those situations where there could be danger, there could be, something that could go wrong. Like prepare them, like don't touch it, it's hot. They don't know what hot means until they might get a little too close to something, like, oh, that's hot.
Yeah.
My son learned hot in the bathtub. Like, don't get in the bathtub yet. It's kind of hot. He put his hand in. Oh, that's hot. He understands hot very well now.
Yeah.
And
You got
hot
it.
translates to everything. By the stove, that's hot. Okay, I'm gonna stay away from that. Don't go touch that. It's hot. So he understands. So I think that definitely is a parent thing. So there's just, like I said, there's just a conversation that you need to have with your partner in regards to how roles are played and who has what roles, and just
Yeah.
make
But I
sure you're
like that.
working together. Yeah.
Prepare and protect, and both need their own balance.
Mm-hmm.
You can overprotect and you can underprotect. You
Yep.
can over prepare and you can under prepare. Because
Yeah.
like at the age we're at, 3, 4 months, it's easy to start thinking like she needs to start learning this. It's like, no, not yet. She doesn't really need to start learning anything yet. She's not even
Start
capable.
boxing.
Right. She's got to learn, or the old like cried out method. They got to learn how to. Well, they just don't have the tools yet. So
Hmm.
striking that balance is maybe another episode for us another time.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
And I
but
think
go ahead.
I'll go ahead. If you guys, I was going to wrap something. I was going to wrap up that, but go ahead. What you
Yeah,
guys?
no, no, go ahead and wrap it up because yeah,
Well, I was gonna say, and then also kind of the last thing we want to do is, for anybody who is struggling with anxiety, and after having done a bunch of research, say like if the stress and anxiety starts to become so severe that it hinders your daily activities, that's when you want to go seek help. So if there's anybody out there that is having a lot of anxiety, like, one, understand it's not just you. Two, understand that there's ways to relieve that anxiety within your spouse, your society, your social circles, talking to the pediatrician, but then also there's professional help out there for anybody who needs it as well. So never have to feel like you're doing anything alone. Always know that there's places to go to be able to talk about what's going on,
yeah.
and hopefully normalize some of the situations you're going through. And the best thing to do as a parent is to raise your kid to feel loved, happy, and healthy. And if you're doing those three things, I think you're good.
I would also say sometimes you might just need to like hire a nanny for a day too. Maybe you can't afford one, but maybe you can afford a day or 2 days. So I just wanted to think for a second beyond what are other options. It's like care.com, nanny.com. I think these are
Yep.
websites, but there might be a different website wherever somebody is, or it's like you can hire someone for a day for like 5 hours. Like
Yeah.
sometimes you just need a nap or something. So think about any option if you need help, because I think if you're resourceful, you can find it. But I think this was a good chat and definitely a
Definitely.
topic we can revisit. So,
Yeah, I learned a lot. I saw a lot of things that I did early on that are, and they're still going on. Like, like I said, there's different levels: infant, newborn, toddler. I'm at the toddler anxiety stages, which is different, but you learn that, again, it's normal. So you want to have a healthy sense of fear when you're bringing a person into this world the right way. So I think that's normal.
well said.